Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Harrington. I'm with the Southwestern Vermont Chamber of Commerce, and you have seen a couple of our telecasts over the last couple weeks as we deal with COVID-19. This one's going to be a little bit different as we are all Zooming from our own homestead in respect and with the authority of the governor to tell us to stay home and stay safe. And a new order came out today, which I'm sure we'll reference to a couple times throughout the telecast. This telecast, unlike the other ones, which we've had with the Southwestern Vermont Medical Center and United Counseling Services, those really focus on the health and safety and even mental health of our community. The Chamber wanted to pull together some of the economic leaders throughout the region to have a discussion really around small business and economic relief as it is today, even though we're right in the midst of a COVID crisis, and what it might look like afterwards. I know a lot of the ones that are joining me on the call today have seen crises before. Most probably remember the Irene crisis, as well as 2008 recession, and of course 9/11. And this is quite different. And so we want to make sure that we're communicating with our audience, both chamber members and the community at large in Southwestern Vermont. Hopefully you're watching this on Facebook Live. This will be recorded and will be available as well. We want to thank Cat TV for hosting us once again. But if you are watching on Facebook Live, I will be monitoring the Facebook comments. So this really is, we have a couple warm-up questions for our panel today, but we really want to hear from the community and really business people some of the concerns, some of the things they've heard, maybe some comments, and I will do my best to reference those and ask them of the panel. Speaking of the panel, to my right, I have Mr. Bill Colvin of the Bennington County Regional Commission. I want to thank him for joining us today. Down below, we have Wendy Morse of the Vermont Department of Labor, and joining us from the Small Business Administration, Chris Harriman. So audience or panel rather, just give a hello and a little bit of background of what your specific industry, what your specific organization is working on. Bill, why don't we start with you?
Great, thanks, Matt, and thanks very much to Cat TV and to Wendy and Chris for joining us on this. As Matt mentioned, I'm Bill Colvin. I'm the Assistant Director of the Bennington County Regional Commission. I think most folks know that BCRC, so-called, also serves as the capacity for our Regional Development Corporation, the Bennington County Industrial Corporation. So serve as the director of that organization as well. So we do community planning and community economic development support work throughout the region, roughly Bennington County. In this capacity, obviously, it's been a lot of business response questions related to the executive orders and various programs, which we'll get into. But thanks again, Matt, for doing this show.
Thanks, Bill. Wendy?
Thank you as well, Matt, and to Bill and Chris and Cat TV. So I'm a regional manager with the Vermont Department of Labor, and the Vermont Department of Labor, in addition to all of our other services that we normally provide in supporting workforce development needs with both employers and job seekers and workforce, we're really heavily responding to the unemployment side of the COVID-19 issues, and we'll be getting into more details around that too as we go along.
Great. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Harriman, and I am with the U.S. Small Business Administration. I am an economic development specialist, and I cover about half the state from Addison County down. But actually, for this disaster, we're all hands on deck, and we're all covering all parts of the state. So I'm here to try and answer some questions about the small business programs and see if there are any concerns that we can address right here, and if not, provide you with contact information so you can email me and set up a call later and we can have a more lengthy conversation. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, the panelists. You know, I'll be moderating and facilitating. So if I'm looking down, I am looking through comments. I'm looking through questions. So don't mind me. The focus is on our esteemed panel today. I do want to start off by saying, you know, we want to. I think everybody on the panel would echo this. We want to thank all our frontline workers, obviously the nurses, the doctors, our health system, which is just world class, and they're showing it today and tomorrow, as well as the truck drivers, the grocery stores that have had to stock. We've heard some amazing stories. I think everybody has. But perhaps some people that aren't being recognized, and I want to take a moment, are the ones I've invited on this panel, and other ones that are working in economic relief. That we know that when a crisis happens, and safety and health must come first. But right on the heels of that is economic relief, and we know this is going to take an economic toll on the globe as well as Southwestern Vermont. So just a kudos and a thank you to everybody on this panel and everybody else right now throughout the state of Vermont that's working on economic relief for our small businesses and communities. That being said, I want to start with some questions, and Bill, I'll go right to you. Last week we had the stimulus rollout from the president, the CARES Act. We've all heard a lot about it, I'm sure. But can you just walk us through some of the business and economic funds that became available through that CARES Act?
Sure, Matt. Thanks very much. And let me just take half a step back and talk about just kind of our response in general, and kind of where BCIC are fielding questions. So in the last 3 weeks, we have been in contact with about 120 businesses who have reached out to us with various questions or concerns, and they have generally fallen into one of three categories. With the March 24th order, the initial order of the Stay Safe, Stay Home order by the governor, there was a lot of interest in what constitutes an essential business. So we feel that a huge number of questions early on essential business nature. The Agency of Commerce and Community Development, I think, did a great job of getting an online kind of guidance system set up through their website to assist right down to industry codes for folks. But there's some questions that are still coming in with regard to that. So that was one big category. Wendy will talk in detail. A lot of questions about unemployment insurance, specifically as those programs are being opened up in new ways to people not previously covered, independent contractors, self-employed, gig economy workers. So trying to get those people pointed in the right direction. And then, as Matt noted, and the specific topic of the question, business relief. And a lot of that came in the form of the initial $2.3 trillion stimulus package passed by Congress and signed by the president, commonly referred to as the CARES Act. Chris will talk in detail, I'm sure, about the programs running through the SBA, and really that's where the primary programs of assistance exist for small businesses, particularly in two main loan programs: the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, also known as EIDL, EIDL, and the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program. So those are the two kind of major loan programs. There has been a significant number of questions that have come through to us about how they interplay, and we've tried to refer those out to our partners at Vermont SBDC, which is a component of SBA. So Nancy Shuttleworth in our region, and as well as getting some questions directly to Chris. The EIDL program is for economic assistance due to the disaster, which is pretty much all businesses at this point. That is a program available directly through the SBA. And then the Paycheck Protection Program is to, the idea is to allow businesses to continue to employ and pay their workers throughout the disaster, or what we hope is throughout the disaster, with the opportunity for some forgiveness of those loans on the back end, provided they retain employees and payroll over the course of the pandemic. There's a lot kind of finer detail there. There is the opportunity, although both programs can cover similar expenses, to the extent that you can direct them to cover different expenses, they can be utilized together. And that's really where we're trying to direct folks to the SBDC for some guidance there as to how these play together. And I think the general advice is to, for businesses, if in question, apply for both and kind of try to sort it out later. Unfortunately, I'm sure, again, Chris will talk about this in more detail. The rules and the guidance coming out of SBA and the federal government at the federal level are changing even after the rollout of the program. I'll give you one example. I think people are familiar with one particular component of the EIDL loan, which allows for a $10,000 advance, which does not need to be repaid, potentially. So that is actually an up to $10,000 advance, and there's some criteria there. So I think a lot of people were expecting, they apply, they get $10,000. The stated goal was within 3 days, just due to the volume. I think that's been challenging, and SBA has been trying to get accurate guidance out as those rules continue to change. So at this point, hoping people aren't expecting an automatic 10,000. There are some criteria, can be up to that amount. Still a really, really valuable program. Obviously, tremendous interest in the Paycheck Protection Program. The system was, overwhelmed last Friday when the initial rollout. I know that some Vermont banks actually got shut out of the system, but interesting numbers coming out of the Vermont Bankers Association. There were actually 11 banks in Vermont that were set up and were able to participate through the system beginning last Friday to write PPP loans. From Friday around noon till Sunday evening, there were 769 applications Vermont-wide through those 11 banks and $338.9 million in commitments to Vermont businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program in the first 3 days. We know that number is dramatically higher at this point, and a number of other institutions, including new institutions, have come online getting SBA approval to underwrite those loans at this point. So that continues to evolve. I'm sure folks have seen at the federal level some discussion. The initial tranche was $350 billion for that program. All expectations were that was going to be committed pretty quickly. Congress is talking about an additional $250 billion tranche at this point. Had a bit of a hang up in DC yesterday, but we expect by next week something along those lines is likely to be coming forward. So I know there are a lot of questions. Chris can provide a lot greater detail there, but those are the two big programs that have come out to assist small businesses.
Great, Bill. And why don't we go right to you, Chris, as we've kind of mentioned the Small Business Administration. Give us a little bit about the background of the Small Business Administration, the function you serve, but really around that EIDL loan, which Bill mentioned. And then, you and I were talking yesterday about some myths and some facts about it. I think it'd be great for people to hear from you about what is real and what isn't real as of today.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And Bill, great job explaining the two programs. So the SBA, if you are not familiar with who we are, the Small Business Administration is a very small, well, it used to be small, federal agency that has district offices in every state. And what we are tasked with doing is making sure that small businesses get a fair share of everything in our communities, federal dollars that are spent on government contracting, loans that are available to small businesses, programs for training and counseling and education through our resource partners, including the Small Business Development Center and SCORE and the Women's Business Center and Veteran Business Outreach Centers. So what we're trying to do overall is make sure that small businesses know that there is a place to go and get no cost advising, counseling, and access to capital, and have a face to attach to it in your state. That's what we do. So we've obviously grown a lot in the last couple of weeks because we are, like I said, all hands on deck and hiring like crazy in the loan processing areas. So Bill did explain the two programs. And basically what happened was the big chunk of money was passed to SBA to implement a program. It's actually being funded by both the Treasury Department and SBA. Some of those funds are coming from both places, and both places are dictating the rules and regulations and guidelines and what we call SOPs, the standard operating procedures. Because everything got implemented so quickly, those SOPs, they are literally living documents every moment. So we are trying to update those all the time to make sure that the banks and the, not just banks, but the lenders have information that is pertinent to that PPP program, which I like to call Triple P. That's my wrestling name for it because we have to have a little humor in here. So the Triple P program that's done through the banks, technically the rollout dates were last Friday was the rollout for traditional small businesses, nonprofits, and other types of organizations, and actually some that were used to be considered other than small were actually eligible now. And that was supposed to be last Friday. Up until that point, actually a whole lot of applications were being processed and given to the banks ahead of time, just in anticipation of that. And then today was supposed to be the official rollout for sole proprietors and independent contractors that are able to support their request with documentation on payroll or similar pieces of information that support taking money out of the business to pay yourself. So I think both of those, well, not the third, but today's date kind of went out the window last week because everybody just put their applications in, and I actually agreed with that. So the challenge we're having right now is that the lenders are trying very, very hard to get as many people into this program as possible with as much information as they can so that they would have the highest potential for forgiveness on these loan programs. And basically, in a nutshell, what it is you provide them with some information. That information creates a baseline. Then the loan application goes through the approval process. You are told the amount that you can be funded, the maximum amount. Once that money is put into your hands, then that money is supposed to be spent on certain things, primarily payroll. At least 75% of that money is to be spent on payroll during a designated amount of time. And then at the end of that period, you as a business owner go back to the bank and say, here is the more supporting documents that state that the most recent payroll compared to the baseline is at 100% or greater. And if that is in fact true, there might be able to be a couple of other expenses paid in there, which we won't go too far into detail on that. But in a nutshell, that's what it is. Our biggest challenge right now, and we are hoping beyond hope that we can get permission for the banks to fund these programs so that the money doesn't run out. I mean, people that have their applications in, get them funded, but allow the timing on the 8-week period to be further out. So if we're still in our stay-at-home policy, how do we bring our workers back to work and get back up to 100% if we're also in the stay-at-home mandate, which was just extended to May 15th? So we're hoping that there can be some leeway there. I have heard of fundings being scheduled, closings. I'm so excited to hear that. I had a couple of emails this morning from people saying, hey, I got my approval. So now what do I do? And my advice to people that have gone through the Triple P process with their lender, number one, thank your lender, because those guys have been, I shouldn't say guys, those people have been, I know lenders that are calling our office at midnight. I mean, and there's a guy in our office that's answering it at midnight, if you can believe that. But anyway, so they're working very hard to get this done, but they are the ones that are going to provide you with the requirements that they at their institution are going to require in order for you to have access to the forgiveness program. So potentially, all or a good portion of that loan, when you go back with all of your documentation, could just go away. So potentially, all things being perfect, you could have the entire amount that you borrowed eliminated. That is our goal for everyone. Will that happen with everyone? No. But that's, in a nutshell, that's the Triple P, and those are the most questions I get. Do you want me to wait on the idle?
Yeah, let's wait there and let's go to Wendy. We'll have a whole kind of pizza pie of information and from different sources and just different, I think, crises. One of those, Wendy, you can probably speak to, maybe not a crisis, but definitely a lot more than what the Vermont Department of Labor is used to. Can you speak a little bit to the unemployment claims? I think I just heard recently, I put in my claim a couple weeks ago. or my employees have, and they haven't gotten any word yet. So maybe just a general update from you. But then we also heard that a new program is rolling out or has rolled out recently. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we are certainly fielding a ton of calls where people are needing to both file for or initiate their unemployment benefit claim as well as file their weekly claim, and are really curious as to what their status is. What we're asking people to do is to just be very patient with us. We know that it's hard. We know that it's a difficult time. The entire Department of Labor team is really working very hard, 7 days a week, extended hours, trying to make sure that people are accessing their unemployment benefits as quickly as possible. Just to put that into perspective, and these numbers are a little bit old because this was based on Monday, but we saw for the week of March 22nd through the 28th, we saw 27,000 claims come into our center that week. That same week in 2019, we only had 4,841 claims, so it's an incredible increase. To total number of claims to date. Now, again, this is as of March 15th, so we're talking from March 15th to Monday-ish. We had 63,000 claims, and I had just heard that number is, I believe, well over 70,000 now. And that's what we currently know of that's in our system. That's not including those that are still trying to get in. So our system itself has been completely overloaded with claims. One of the things that Department of Labor has really tried to quickly do is, the original bottleneck was on sort of initiating the claim. So when somebody's first laid off, the first thing that they do is they need to initiate the claim. Our call center, remember, we're coming off from historic unemployment lows, and then all of a sudden we're jumping to, in a week's time, historic unemployment highs. It's crazy how that happened. But our claim center couldn't handle that volume. So within really a couple of days, Department of Labor was able to create an online portal that helped people more efficiently file, at least initiate their claim through an online portal, which alleviated some of the call volume on the phones. The other thing that we've been really trying to do is we're really trying to work on the processing side. So once somebody initiates a claim, people are in sort of this processing phase. And that processing phase is where all this background stuff on the claim happens, to where the unemployment system determines, yep, they should be getting a benefit. Yes, they're eligible. And now they need to file weekly. And filing weekly is what a lot of people don't realize they need to do. And filing weekly is sort of like, putting in your work hours for your timesheet. So when you're employed, you report how many hours you worked, and then you get a paycheck for those hours. The unemployment system works the same way. So claimants need to tell people that they're still in this period of being out of work and needing these benefits. And that's a thing that a lot of people are sort of forgetting. And so if they're not able to do it or they're forgetting to do it, they actually fall back out, and they need to, it's not a big deal, but other than it causes them issues when they try to use the easy ways to get in and file their claim, they need to go through a center rep to do it.
Wendy, because we're on that, and I'm seeing some questions come in from Facebook. So again, if you're watching live on Facebook, you have questions for Bill, Wendy, or Chris, please make sure you're asking them. One of them, and we've heard this over the last couple of weeks, will my employees who are applying for unemployment affect my experience rating? So can you clarify that?
So there's all sorts of I'm going to refer them to the website. So the unemployment website does speak to that. Under the pandemic unemployment insurance programming, there has been some forgiveness around whether or not it would impact an employer's contribution rating. I'm not the one to tell people, yep, for sure that, yep, it will not impact you, or yes, it will. I think the best course of action for employers that are really wondering that is to research the answer to that question directly through the website, because it's a wealth of information. And if for some reason that question isn't answered through the website, and you can certainly give the claimant center a call to ask that question specifically, or you can email them. And we are also encouraging people to sign up, whether it's an employer or whether it's claimant. We're encouraging people to sign up for the unemployment insurance newsletter. And we are also offering virtual town halls on both.
Yeah, they've been terrific. Yep. And just to follow up to that, and this, I want to kind of bundle this all in one question. A lot of self-employed people. I believe the Department of Labor was rolling out the ability for self-employed that hadn't filed before can now file. And do they have to do weekly claims as well? And that's a question coming off of Facebook.
So I believe they're going to have the same requirement as traditional unemployment claimants, where they would need to tell the system, yes, I'm still out of work. Yes, I still need the benefit. I believe that's going to be the case. The self-employment general contractor, so that's a whole part of the unemployment system that is very new for us. And typically, that system has never really been around. So it's something that we're still in the process of developing with guidance from USDOL.
Great. A question for Bill, and then I want to go to Chris after. Wendy mentioned that just today the governor put out his Stay Safe, Stay Home order, extending it to May 15th. I think we all know what this means, but I wanted to get your expert opinion on what does this mean for businesses, employers, and employees, and I'm sure that trickles down to Department of Labor and FBA as well.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So I think the answer is it depends a little bit. I don't think, by and large, people were probably surprised by the extension of the order. I think we probably all saw this was coming, at least for some additional period of time. Like Chris, I was listening to the governor's press conference just before joining this presentation today. I think one interesting thing coming out of that presentation was a question regarding the potential reopening of any other businesses that are not currently considered non-essential before that May 15th date. And the governor did not rule out that possibility. So that is not a guarantee. I think the governor and administration, folks at Department of Health are looking closely and daily at kind of the trends and the data and the science that's evolving around what's happening in Vermont with regard to the pandemic. But there is an interest, if safe and where possible, to potentially begin to reopen certain segments of the economy that are not currently open and considered essential. The governor did caution that is going to be what he's calling incremental and kind of a quarter turn of the knob at a time, and with some expected restrictions and guidelines. So I think, as with everything throughout this entire pandemic response, we need to try to stay as abreast of current information as possible, but I expect things will be evolving quickly. An example of that, I think, Matt, important certainly to your members, was as part of the extension today, the governor also announced that accommodations will be able to begin taking online reservations again for stays after June 15th. So I think that's an example of one of those kind of quarter turns of the knob and loosening restrictions, provided the health data continues to trend in a way that we hope. I would expect you'll see other similar, very small loosenings of restrictions in other industries in the coming weeks.
Wendy or Chris, do you want to add to that about just the impact of the extension on small business, maybe from your specific kind of vertical?
Yeah, this is Chris. Yeah, it's huge. And I can tell you that as a business owner myself, my family owns a campground, and we were instructed to put on the front page of our website that we cannot take reservations for any time in the future. That was devastating for our business. So I was really excited to hear that we can now put a new message up there, and all of the hospitality industry and camping and all the wonderful things that we have here and touring can start taking those reservations. It's huge. What I'm hoping is that, as I was talking about with the Triple P program, is that we can get some matching extensions on those payroll fundings so that they will extend out a little bit. But I do know that that's a big part of our community here in Vermont, and so it was a little bit of a sigh of relief for us in that industry and my colleagues and also my constituents. We have a lot of clients that are in that industry, so that's
Sure.
where we are with it.
Yeah, and very much important to the Vermont economy, for sure. I want to go to Wendy real quick. I think it's going to be a quick question, a quick answer. Somebody on Facebook asked, what are the extended hours for the Department of Labor? It's currently 4. I would assume 4 p.m., and I'm not sure that's accurate, but what are the extended hours?
So we've actually had Saturday hours, and the claim center has been open. Then it's should be posted on our website. I believe it's either 8 to 3 or 9 to 3, but they've actually had Saturday hours. Again, the center may not be, or the lines may not necessarily be open, but Department of Labor staff are still open, working on a lot of things behind the scenes and trying to make sure that these claims are being sent out as quickly as possible.
Great. Wendy, do you know how Bennington County compares to other counties or the rest of the state? Are we higher, lower, about average with other counties in terms of unemployment claims?
I don't think we know that number for sure because we're still in the process of getting through the claims, getting all the claims through the portals. I've not seen any of the numbers come out for county specific. I'm very interested to see what those numbers look like. Of course, I manage services in 3 counties, Bennington, Rutland, and Addison. So I'm very curious to see really how all of those counties are comparing in relation to each other. I can tell you that it's a problem all over the state. It's not anything that's isolated to Bennington.
Yep. Chris, I had promised to come back to you to speak about the EIDL loan a little bit. So maybe you want to update our audience on what the EIDL loan is and how it can be applied for.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the EIDL is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and it is a program that has been in the Office of Disaster Assistance for a very long time. It's the same program that is used for floods and earthquakes and fires, and it's the same program. However, it has morphed for this particular COVID-19 disaster. So what they've done is they've taken the existing mechanism and just changed it enough so that there are more laxed guidelines on who's eligible, how quickly things can be funded, and things like that. So I'll just go quickly into a couple things that were said already and support. Thank you very much, Bill, for also giving a good explanation on that one. So number one, the most important thing to know is that that the $10,000 that has been sprayed all over the media is in fact, just like you were saying, up to $10,000. So it has always been stated that it was an up to $10,000 from the SBA. Unfortunately, some of the media picked it up and said everybody's going to get $10,000, and unfortunately, it was a really difficult situation to break to people. So here's how it goes. So the $10,000, it is up to $10,000. And there are criteria that you have to meet in order to be eligible for this. And it's a loan advance. So when you go online and apply for this, it's a very simple application. It is, I did it myself. It was 14 minutes, and that's only because I had to go look up a couple of things. I would say 12 minutes max. It is very, very simple. I've got a little cheat sheet. If you need it, I'm happy to email it to you with the direct link to get there. It asks only a few pieces of information about your business. It asks you what your gross receipts were for the prior 12 months. We're telling people to use 2019. Cost of goods sold if you have it. If you're a nonprofit, there are some guidelines on other amounts that need to be put in there. And then it asks you the number of employees you have. The guidelines for where the 10,000 potential loan advance, remember you're applying for a loan, you do not ask for an amount. This is key. There is nowhere on the application that asks you how much you would like to borrow. And the reason for that is when your information shoots off through cyberspace and gets to a loan processor, they'll look at your details, they'll pull a credit report, and they will determine what you are eligible for in a maximum amount. Then there will be a communication from SBA by email to you saying, this is what you're eligible for. You've been approved, you've been declined, these are the reasons, whatever it is, but this is the total amount, the highest amount. At that point, you will be told what you're eligible for the loan advance. So let's say they tell you it's $1,000, and at that point, that loan, you can accept that. And well, I mean, you can't really barter about the loan advance piece. They're going to tell you what you're eligible for.
What you get, yeah.
Right. But at that point, you can say, that's all I want. You can say, if they tell you you're eligible for $25,000 and only $1,000 is the loan advance piece, you can say, stop right there. I don't want any more. I don't want a loan. I just want that $1,000. Put it in my bank account and we're done. You
and
can
it's
do
forgiven,
that
right there.
And what happens is it goes into your account, and very shortly after that, it's forgiven. So what happens is if you decide you want to take the rest of the loan, you can take a piece of it, you can take all of it. You can also say, put it in suspense. And I want to wait for another 6 months or 3 months to see if I need it later, but I want my information to be held. You can do any of those things at that point. The good thing, one of the good things about the EIDL is that you can use it for more things than you can for the Paycheck Protection Program. So you can use this, it's meant for ongoing business operating expenses, supplies, inventory. Yes, you cannot use it to renovate the building, because that would be creating something new from a disaster fund. This is supposed to be specifically in order to keep you up and operating, because of a direct result of the disaster, you were not able to do it on your own. So if you just keep that in mind, that's a good way to look at it. So the 3-day thing, that was also another issue, that is actually 3 days from approved application, not from application submission. And I apologize to everyone that information was sent out, because boy, that has really created some stress. And we're so sorry that people just assumed that was going to happen. You do have to go through the loan application process. They have to look at your information. They have to verify that you're a real person. That's super important, because there's a lot of bad actors out there. People are creating false identities to apply for this. So we have to verify you as a person, verify your business, and then proceed from there. The other thing I wanted to, so the other thing very quickly I wanted to say was, I absolutely agree that if it's prudent, apply for both. Once you go through the process, you can make a decision at that point which one is best for you. Have a chat with someone at the Small Business Development Center or SCORE or the Women's Business Center and see, number one, if it should be done at all. I mean, I'm going to be very frank here. There are some businesses that were in very difficult situations prior to the disaster, with a lot of debt and having some difficulties financially, and the potential for getting any other debt could not only ruin that business, but them personally, because it's going to put a lot of stress and emotional impact on people. If there was already some situations going on, this is not the way to cure it. This is really only to keep you going and running at the very minimum level until things get better.
Well, and I think, Chris, to add to that, the caveat of all of this is, especially the idle loan, is it's still a loan and it's still a debt. Whether you're, as you said, a business that's struggling, or even a general small mom and pop shop that would, but this is still taking on debt, and to be cautious about that, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that there are some great spreadsheets that the SBDC has created. I just saw it yesterday. It's fantastic, super simple. Plug your numbers in. Can you really afford more debt? It's great, and there's a good explanation
Great.
on there. I'm happy to forward that to you guys so you can send it out to your
Perfect.
constituents.
Perfect. Bill, I want to go to you, and I want to pivot a little bit away from this, but I do think that it's kind of connected by a dotted line, and that's the 2020 census. We've been encouraging from the chamber for people to fill out that 2020 census. I think BCRC has as well. Speak to us. What does that mean, other than letting the government know that I'm a person living in the United States?
Yeah, thanks very much for that question, Matt. And obviously, everybody's attention is in a different place right now, and that's completely understandable. At the same time, with most folks being at home, given all the challenges of homeschooling and continuing to work and juggling everything we're trying to juggle along with the stress, this actually does serve as a pretty good time to kind of go online. It literally takes 10 minutes. To fill out the census and ensure that you're counted. Many of you, probably got a mailing like this at home that directs you to the website. If not, you can do it at 2020census.gov. Fill in some brief information and hit send. So why? Federal aid, the amount of the level of voting resources. The amount of grant funds that come to the state writ large, a lot of those programs are based on population. So we want to ensure that every person in Vermont is counted to ensure that the maximum amount of federal aid due to our state is available to us to assist. I think more than ever, perhaps, that becomes important. Now, as we look at the kind of a long horizon of digging out of this hole. And again, kind of a pivot back, or half a pivot back. I think you mentioned at the beginning, Matt, where we are now in terms of immediate response. I want to assure people that BCRC and others are already looking at what's the next stage? What does stabilization and recovery look like? We are actively engaged with both FEMA and the Economic Development Administration regarding longer-term resources for planning and assistance for the business community in our region. EDA has said without question, Southern Vermont is the most engaged portion of Vermont right now with the EDA. There's a $1.2 billion that has come to the EDA to assist in recovery. Just want to assure people that we're trying to direct people to the right places in the short term to deal with this emergency, but we're also beginning to focus on what the longer term recovery looks like. And we know that it's going to be a haul, it's going to be a stretch, but we're doing what we can to kind of stay on top of that at this point too.
Great, thanks, Bill. And if you're just tuning in, especially on Facebook Live, if you have a question for Bill Colvin with the Bennington County Regional Commission, Wendy Morris with the Department of Labor, or Chris Harriman with the Small Business Administration, to leave a comment there. We're going to start to wind down. I think I have two more questions, and if I see more come up on Facebook, I'll ask them. But Bill, you kind of were scratching along the edges of this, and I'd love to ask the panel, for those that were around during Irene or 2008 recession. Wendy, I know you've been through those days. How does it compare? And then also, what were some lessons learned? And I feel like we kind of heard that from you, Bill, just knowing that, hey, not only do we have to focus on triage now, we need to focus on recovery later. And so, wondering if we could go around and just share some lessons learned from a decade ago, and how are we doing things differently this time?
So I'll jump in if you don't mind, Matt. I was working in Wilmington during Irene, so we kind of front line for one of the hardest hit areas, of the state. And I think there were some really important lessons there. I think one I just hinted at is to try to get engaged in kind of what that long-term recovery looks like as soon as possible. Try to get a handle on what resources are going to be available there. And we're certainly trying to do that. I think the other message is community resilience, recognizing that we're in this together. We understand that this literally is impacting everybody. I think the difference, perhaps in this case, following up on your question, is we're now looking at a kind of global experience where people are going through the same things, as opposed to 2008 with the economic recession, which hit the U.S. very hard, but perhaps not the rest of the globe, or something like Tropical Storm Irene, which was very isolated and hurt just certain portions of certain communities. So looking at something much broader, I think that means resources are going to be more spread, but I think we're already seeing that resources are also going to be plentiful. So trying to juggle that, making sure we do what we can for our community to ensure that the resources that are available, to the extent possible, are directed here is going to be important.
Great. Wendy, any lessons learned or tips we can take away from previous disasters?
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly agree with Bill. I think that there are definitely some commonalities with this, but I think there are things that make this a very, very, very different situation. Even when the economy was horrible during 2008 and we struggled, I don't think we had nearly we didn't have the quick level of unemployment that we have now, where it was sort of this need that kept trickling and trickling and trickling. And I think that was very different than this. And then with Irene, as Bill mentioned, it didn't really impact everybody in a negative way, but those that were impacted by Irene were greatly impacted in a negative way. This, because it's got such broad brush strokes, I think that's what makes this very different. Some of the things that we learned from a response, particularly with Irene, was I think we learned a lot from our experience under national emergency grants in the scope of work that we are doing under the national emergency grants. Just from an agency standpoint, I think we figured out what we need to make sure we have in place in order to more effectively deliver those services. And we're already talking about that. I mean, even though our focus has definitely been on the UI side and supporting that, we're also talking about getting ready to spin into recovery. And I think that was our biggest takeaway from all of those other situations, is that we know now we know what the cycle is going to look like. Like right now, it's just instant, rapid response to that immediate need, but we are already starting to put some action plans in place for recovery post-pandemic. And if I could, Matt, I just want to quickly go back just to the unemployment thing, because there's been some real fundamental changes that we're hoping are going to make a great impact in better assisting people starting next week. And one is around making sure, really alphabetizing sort of when people are calling in to file their claims. Our phone systems cannot handle everybody calling in on one day of the week. So, people have been really frustrated because they've been trying to call in and they may have called 1,000 times and they still can't get through the line. So what we're asking people to do is to call in on certain days. And there's actually a press release that just went out and is posted on our website. So you'll know what those days are. If somebody's part of the alphabet isn't until a certain day of the week to call, it doesn't mean that their claim does not get into the system. It's actually a way that we're trying to control how many people are trying to access the system at once so that everybody can get in. So that's a real important thing to know. The other thing, and I I forgot I have this in front of me. So the hours on Saturday, just to clarify, are 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we're actually open, the call center is open until 5 p.m. Monday through Friday as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Wendy. Yep. Chris, any lessons learned from either the SBA or where you were a decade ago during another disaster?
Yeah, actually, there was a lot learned from Irene from with the state of Vermont, and we should be very proud that the Small Business Development Center created a disaster recovery and planning tool that is used nationally now by all of the organizations. It's a really spectacular document that helps people plan for stuff like this. Here's what we learned most of all when you compare the two is when you have a physical disaster, it's tangible. You can see it. And it creates a sense of community for people that are outside of that physical disaster. So what happens is other people see it, they come to your rescue, the people that have not been physically affected by it. This one is so different because absolutely everyone has been impacted without exception. And our gifts to the people that are more impacted are really being experienced. So my advice and the thing I would really encourage people to do, and I think we're going to go take a look at this later, and Matt and Bill, I think, and Wendy, we should all maybe team up to do this, is we need to create some training sessions for people on business owners about how to prepare for either physical or just financial and this type of disaster. So in the future, we're not all as surprised by how it has affected us personally and in our businesses, and who our resources are, and how we can quickly get our hands on something that will calm some of the stress and the nerves that are just raw right now. So that's what I would like to take away from it. And we can all talk about that later. I'd love to do a joint effort with that. But everyone's doing a great job. You guys are my hero. I hear about Bennington all the time. Bennington County is the best for tapping into all of these great resources. You guys are just amazing.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I think on that note, I want to hear last question, and unless I see anything else on Facebook, but maybe end on a more personal note, a more mental health note. How is what is a tip you can share with the audience of how you're dealing with the stress, and how are you dealing with what is probably 24/7 at home without a whole lot of interaction with other people? And Bill, we'll start with you on maybe some things that you're doing right now just to handle the workload, the stress load, and how to separate personal and professional life.
Yeah, so like others, it's that balance. Having a child at home and two parents. My wife is also working from home, so it's it's splitting that duty. But trying to establish as much of a routine as possible. We have both made a point, along with our child, of trying to stay as physically active as is safe, getting outside, away from others when we can, and getting that little mental health break. And really just trying to stay focused on our work, and in the work that we do, it's pretty easy to stay focused on it because you're really sensing this ability to kind of help direct others in a positive way, and it's really, really important, and work which hopefully benefits the community. So just on that note, I know the Chamber has a phenomenal website for small business resources. I would encourage people to also visit ours at bcrcbt.org. We're updating it hourly sometimes with new resources. Virtually everything that Chris mentioned is available on our website, including the disaster recovery guide from SBDC, as well as the kind of various applications, and kind of trying to distinguish between which programs might be right for you. So again, thanks, Matt, for this opportunity and the important work that the Chamber's doing.
Thank you, Bill Colton. And Wendy, something you're doing or not doing to eliminate the stress or limit the stress?
Well, like Bill, I'm in a regular routine. I still get up super early every day and work out, and try to do try to have as much normalcy in my private life as I do in my professional life. And when I'm in my home office, it's funny because I actually have a husband that's home who's remote teaching right now and a high school student. My daughter is also learning from home. So I feel like we've got an education and employment center now in our house, and that's what I call us.
Yep.
But just, trying to have some normalcy. And in terms of the workload and the stress, there's definitely a lot of work. There's, as Bill said, there's no shortage of work. But I have to say, one of the things that's really good about what we're doing is that we're, I feel every time that I have a conversation with somebody who's really struggling, trying to get through, an unemployment line, or just wants to access, or just wants somebody to talk to, it's really rewarding just being able to talk to somebody and providing that kind of assistance. And for me, that really removes a lot of the stress of just the how much work we have. That's been really good. And the other thing too, I try not to stress out about things I can't control. And that pandemic is absolutely something I have no control over. So I just have to keep, focusing on what I'm doing at that moment in time, which is really helping people.
Great. Chris, we'll finish with you. Something you're doing to help the stress level.
Unmute. Sorry.
Oh, yep.
Sorry. So number one, unmute when you need to. That's good. So number one is warm compress with eye drops at night. Too much screen time is bad for your eyes. Make sure you take care of them. I put my eye drops in. I put a warm compress on, lay down. It is amazing the difference it'll make with your vision and helping you keep things healthy. The other thing is, I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but all over the state, there are stars up in front of people's homes and businesses made with Christmas lights. The 5-point star, and we use that as a way to get outside and do something positive. And we put a gigantic one where the sign for our campground is. And I love seeing people support it by doing something fun and just silly. And I like it, and it was great. And we've had a lot of comments on it. So, just hang in there, be supportive, help other people, take care of your eyes, and that's my comment.
Great. And I'll add to that too, tend to take a psychological approach to this, and just remembering that there's a left brain and right brain. I think all day long for a lot of hours for many of us, we're using one side of our brain. So it is that getting outside and raking or cooking or working out or doing something creative, using the artistic side of your brain will feel refreshing, and you'll refresh it. And remember that you still get weekends, and you still need to close the computer when the job is done, and try and do that in a different room so that it's not taking over your family room, or else you'll feel like you never leave work, which some of us probably feel through the last couple of weeks. I want to thank this panel sincerely for joining us today. I want to thank Bill Colvin of the Bennington County Regional Commission, Wendy Morse of the Vermont Department of Labor, Chris Harriman of the Small Business Administration, and of course, Cat TV, who is broadcasting this live. This will be recorded as well, so if you want to go back and you want to hear a specific section, that'll be available. I know that a lot of us have resources. We've mentioned a lot of resources on this. We will work with Cat TV to have those resources available on this video as well. And again, I hope everybody's being safe. Have a very good Friday, a very good Easter, and have a great weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in.